A very good afternoon to our guest of honor, Mr. Saktiandi Supat, all our EV Weekend 2022 valued sponsors and partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the CarBuyer team, we are very pleased to welcome you to the second iteration of EV Weekend, Singapore's first and largest EV showcase. In 2021, the inaugural EV Weekend was held at RWS amidst pandemic rules and restrictions. 2022's edition at Suntec already looks to comfortably exceed that in terms of attendance and reach. That's of course thanks to our partners BYD, DFSK, Hongse Evolution, Hyundai, Komoko Motors, Interwell, Opel, Peugeot, Polestar, and Tesla. Official tire sponsors GT Tires, and special thanks to our official plenary sponsor, Sing Life with Aviva. EV Weekend's role has always been more than just a car show. It's also about educating consumers, giving them what they need to make better, more informed choices that can benefit not just them, but all of us. With Singapore's pivot to electrified motoring, questions and topics surrounding EVs will be more and more commonly brought up, debated, and will require consensus and resolution. The plenary sessions we've organized today hopes to set the stage for that. And to kick things off, I would now like to invite Member of Parliament for Bishan Toa Payoh GRC and Chairman of the Government Parliamentary Committee for Transport, Mr. Saktiandi Supat, to give this event address. Mr. Supat, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be a guest here at Singapore's first EV show, actually twice. So this is the second one. The first one was at the in Sentosa. Of course, we are in a different setting, so we are not wearing masks anymore. We're in an endemic situation, and I think the cars are nearby. It's just a few steps away. As you may know, EV Weekend 2021 was attended by quite a number. It was a wonderful show. I think with a lot of people attending. I think it left a lasting impression on me at that time, and I had a good chat with some of the participants and some of the guests on that night. My thanks actually, before I start sharing some of my thoughts, my thanks to Chun Mun and his team from CarBuyer and his team. I think they put together a very exciting event again in 2022. While only a year has passed, actually the landscape has changed dramatically for the better, for EVs in Singapore in particular. And EV Weekend, like what we see today in a mall for the first time, is a clear reflection of that. So big testament to Chun Mun and his team. Thank you. So just as the cars you see on the show floor bring exciting new approaches and new technologies to the table, there have been exciting developments with regards to electric motoring here. First, I'm glad that the Singapore government's first official tender for EV chargers, most of them in HDB car parks, has been completed. As of September 2022, EV owners are now able to tap more than 3,000 public charging points across the island, a 50% increase from a year before. Quite significant. So it's a shift that we've seen over a year. In fact, we have now embarked on a second wave of EV charging for Singapore with a newly announced EV charger tender for all sections of the island. So this new tender covers 2,000 HDB car parks and 12,000 new EV charging points for HDBs, and should be completed by the end of 2025. And I think it won't stop there. It will go on because we're aiming for zero carbon by 2050 or so. But from January to September 2022, EV made up 10% of all new car registrations in 2022. This is triple the adoption rate in 2021. Quite significant as well. So industry experts tell me that compared to 2021, they expect the EV population to double by the end of the year. Second, MOT just introduced the first reading in Parliament yesterday. on the electric vehicles charging bill. I hope it will be passed. So they have proposed a few things, on things like rules and regulations to govern the charging of EVs in Singapore. This is good. If it gets passed, means that there will be more standards, more efficiency in the types of EV charging, and good for consumers. So these rules and regulations will meet the objectives of the bill. For example, to regulate the safe charging of EVs, to ensure the provision of reliable EV charging services, and to expand the network of accessible charging infrastructure in Singapore. So there are a few things that have been proposed in the bill. So we look forward to the bill being passed and probably a further discussion on that when the second reading is being discussed in Parliament. Given all that, I think we can safely say that Singapore is on its way and beginning to make clear progress in its EV journey. I think it's not a long way to go, but we've already started quite exuberantly. And last year's EV weekend is a good example of the huge interest on EV cars. And I think we're going to see that trajectory going up even further. So EVs are definitely a part. All of you here is a testament to that. All of you believe in that. EVs are part of the solution for less polluting, more sustainable transport. Of course, on top of public transport. So other than having a car, we also encourage Singaporeans to take the public transport. So vehicular transport has run on fossil fuels for decades. And it's clear that we need to make the change for the benefit of all Singaporeans, even though we are small, but we could have multiplier effects in Singapore, in the region, and hopefully globally as well. So there's still much to be done and many challenges to be faced, but I believe with EVs, as part of the solution, on top of other things that we aim towards sustainable environment that we want to achieve in Singapore, we can make the transition to something better than it already is. So more responsible and maybe even more fun in the process, as you can see in the cars. Different designs, different colors, and different wide range of diverse choices for EV customers to choose from. But I think the changes won't happen overnight. Like I shared just now, the EV charging system infrastructure will take time, but they are happening. They are happening at a rapid pace. In the region, probably Singapore is the fastest one, but we could go even faster. And perhaps at a rate and scale that will continue to surprise many of us as more of you drive EV cars or more of us switch to EV cars. So EV Weekend is simply one of the milestones on this sustainability journey that Singapore has begun. So on that note, I'd like to wish all of you here today a wonderful EV Weekend 2022. And may we have a more sustainable transport system going forward, especially together with EV cars playing a pivotal role going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll now proceed with our first panel titled Singapore and EVs, The Long View. It focuses on the long run of EVs and has an industry and business focus. Our panelists will consist of Edward Tan, Executive Director of Hongse Evolution, Ivan Quek, Chief Commercial Officer of Novowatt, Jonathan Tan, Commercial Head Network Development, SP Mobility of SP Group, and last but not least, Xiao Han Ko, Head of Commercial and Operation of Charge Plus. Our moderator for this panel will be CarBuyer Singapore's Head of Content, Darren Wong. Over to you, Darren.
Thank you, everybody. So welcome to panel 1 of EV Weekend 2022. If your live stream viewers are just joining us, this is our first panel, and it focuses on the long view, about 5 years into the future, with an industry and business focus. Our second panel will talk about more intimate things related to driver experience and living with an EV. So stay tuned after this. All right, so first of all, thanks to our esteemed guests for making time here today. Yeah, you all look really excited, right? Yeah. Not nervous at all, no? Okay, I'll stop the jokes. Okay, my first topic is about something fast and speedy. And we're not talking about how fast EVs can go, But we're talking about charging speed. So how fast does EV charging really need to be? Yeah. I think Xiao knows about this.
I mean, it really depends on, I think, the use case, your lifestyle, as well as how you intend to go about your day that day, right? So most of us would have our electric vehicles idle anyway when you're sleeping. So you can charge overnight in your residential locations. But of course, you know, if you are intending to make a trip down to Malaysia, you need a quick charge in say 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Then of course a DC charge would be important, and you wouldn't want to wait very long in the car park for your car to be charged up, right? So then a DC charge within say 30 minutes, 45 minutes would be sufficient, I would say. Right, so if you go out there, look at the charging network, you see charging points going up to DC 120 kilowatt. Some may be a little bit higher power rated. So I think those charging points would be suitable if you're looking to have a fast charge. Overnight charging, you can look for the AC chargers. 7.4 kilowatt would be sufficient for a full overnight charge as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, so to add on to that, right, Xiao Han said use case is very important. The other thing that we also need to take into account is power capacity availability at a given location. So, you know, we've been installing charging stations for over 4, almost close to 5 years at this point. And at the very beginning, a lot of landlords, they call us up, you know, they just say, I want it fast. And they don't even know how much power they have available to do so. It's a very Singaporean thing to want something very fast. But Xiao Han was right. She was saying that people don't really realize until they buy an EV or they really think about it how long their car really stays parked for. And I think it's really important as EV adoption grows that we need to find a balance between the focus of charger availability as well as power capacity and the needs of the users.
Right, I see. Ivan, I think yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of them. For like us, I think for offices and residentials where users are staying for a longer period of time, it's okay for them to use like AC chargers. And even for shopping malls, like if you are having a dinner, if you're going for movies, you won't want to come out of it halfway and remove your car from a charging port, especially when you're using DC chargers. But for commercials, industrial compounds, commercial fleets, and that need to fulfill their deliveries or their trips will need to use DC chargers to rotate among their own users.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to add on a little bit extra to what everyone has said, because my ideas are similar yet a little bit different. Because we came from cars, then now we're doing electric commercial vehicles, and soon to be electric buses. So our idea is similar yet different. Why? First, we all are all thinking about cars. Cars, passenger cars, people driving them, go to work, go to home, that's the usual place. So in most people's context, 7.2 kilowatts up to 22 kilowatts, your car usually takes 11 for most passenger vehicles. Fine. Charge it at night, charge it at home. 11 kilowatts is usually sufficient for everyone to utilize. But for cars, you have two other flip sides. You've got also the taxis, you also have the ride-hailing. These fellas are going to be plowing the roads all throughout the time, and it's also dependent on the charging availability of the speed of the DC chargers which are available and what their vehicles can take. So usually between 30 kilowatts and 50 kilowatts for a DC charger for these two extra type of vehicles for taxis and ride-hailing. So if we could have more of those, that would be fantastic, especially for those people. We also deal with electric commercial vehicles. The idea is a person with a commercial vehicle would have approximately 150 kilometers to drive a day. Their standard range is about 268 kilometers. Therefore, 50 kilowatts, 30 kilowatts DC chargers are also ideal and necessary for them. So for those two segments, cars and commercial vehicles, between 30 and 50 kilowatts for DCs and AC 11 kilowatts should be about right. Then the last third take is We know government's going to go into electric buses. Electric buses have humongous batteries, and with the support of the government, we should be all looking at for better buses, faster charging time, less downtime at the bus depots. So we would probably look at DC chargers about 350, 380 kilowatts. It's a astronomically high number, but with government support and for the better of all the public commuters on the electric buses, I think that would be necessary to help speed it up so we can charge the buses and not leave it for a long time waiting for a charge.
Right. So you're saying on one hand it's passenger stuff, and on the other hand we have the commercial stuff is slightly different, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think people using it for own self-usage, what I deem as personal usage, AC 7 plus 11, 22, that's fine. But if they're going to be like doing ride-hailing or taxis, they need a DC charger to go and run it. That's for the normal people. Commercial vehicles, on the other hand, they're plowing the roads as much as the commercial taxi, Grab, Gojek drivers. They need it, a quick charge every day.
Okay, since we're kind of segueing into the next topic actually, which is commercial and heavy or commercial electric vehicles. So electrification of CVs and HEVs, I think, will benefit Singapore hugely because of the use case and the mileage. So I think Ed, maybe you want to chip in on that first. Yeah.
Just checking the board for a second.
Look,
Base and mileage and benefits. Commercial EVs. Number one, maintenance. Maintenance over 10 years is very low. In our slogan, when we are selling electric commercial vehicles, because we do more than one brand, over a 10-year period with the current price of fuel versus electricity, and you're running, let's say, 150 kilometers a day, 5 days a week, not 7, but 5, you should be able to save at least about $80,000 over 10 years. And that would equate to almost purchasing one extra vehicle, technically in operational costs. So in electric commercial vehicles, as long as you drive it, the more you drive, the more you save. The more you drive, the cost per kilometer drops down dramatically. In traditional ICE vehicles, you've got an engine, you've got a gearbox. With the electric commercial vehicles or electric vehicles, what you have is a motor, not an engine. Therefore, that doesn't require an overhaul. That could require replacement, but that is at a very cheap rate. One motor will be less than one overhaul of an engine, or even maybe even to a certain extent, maybe even 1/3 the price of one. And a commercial vehicle, you might go to 3 overhauls of an engine throughout a year. So depending on how much you drive. The savings for maintenance is one big part, which you could probably save 20, 30,000 over 10 years. But once you compute the cost of savings of petrol versus electricity, which these 3 individuals represent, the savings are tremendous. The more you drive, the more you save. Fuel is expensive. It pollutes the environment. It doesn't do us any good, but at least for electricity, the cost is so much more convenient, and we use gas rather than coal for electricity here in Singapore, so that's a lot better.
Right. Okay. Thanks for summing it up, Ed. Ivan, do you have anything to add on this topic?
I think that right now the LTA have done a great job incentivizing the SMEs from adopting EV vehicles, commercial vehicles, with the ETS and CVS going on. I think if this works well, if more can be done for them to pick up this adoption, the transition to electrifying the fleet.
Right. And the benefits for commercial EVs are actually running out at the end of this year, right? And does anybody know anything about that? You heard anything? Yeah. Xiao Han, you had anything to add on the commercial angle?
I think in terms of adopting commercial electric vehicles, it's definitely useful. You know, whether it's in terms of reducing pollution, saving costs for the company. But I think one important part about the ecosystem that we should never neglect is the drivers. So a lot of times, you know, when the companies want to implement electric vehicles, very few companies actually consider how the drivers are actually going to adapt to a new technology and how they would feel throughout their whole change process. So I think companies who have successfully electrified a huge volumes of fleet actually have not neglected that part and have made them successful compared to their counterparts, and I think that's something that we should all be, a bit more aware about.
Right. Thanks. John, anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah, do let me start by saying that yes, just now when we were talking about charger speed, we were talking more from the perspective of private ownerships. So I really hope that you didn't feel very left out. But, when it comes to commercial vehicles, there is definitely a lot of questions to be asked. I think, beyond just, private owner, drive to work, drive home, park the car overnight, right? We got to ask, is it a set route that you're going? Do you think you'll need a charge in between? Do you let your drivers even go home and take the vehicles home, right? Some of those questions, right, if the answer is yes, then, you might need DC during the day and you can charge overnight using AC, so that it's still that option, that possibility that you can tap on the AC charging network. But we also understand the need for DC. And I think right now, one of the key roadblocks when it comes to the greater adoption of commercial electric vehicles, I would say that there are two. One of them is lack of customizable options. So there are some people that need very specific things or features within their vehicle, such as refrigeration. I don't think there's a commercial EV available in Singapore right now that can accommodate that. Second of all, if it's a very large commercial vehicle, right, then we are looking at things like, where can that vehicle actually charge? So, for us, we do actually have a couple of partners where we ended up installing charging stations on their own premise, because the vehicle that they were having to charge was just so big. And we need to think about when we scale it up, right, for centralized charging for larger commercial vehicles, then what are the implications on the grid? What are the implications on potentially the environment as well?
That's a very good point, actually. And bringing back to our first topic about passenger cars, I think I talked to you, Xiao Han, the other day about is the grid ready for 7.4 kilowatts in every car park in a HDB lot? Because that's a lot of power, right? Yeah.
I think this is public news. The LTA has consistently told the public that we have insufficient power capacity for large number of charging points to be deployed. But the whole nation is aware of this issue, and I think they are putting in resources in terms of beefing up the infrastructure. So you guys, we get a lot of questions from drivers, and some drivers are actually very upset that, we only have 3 charging points in HDB car parks. Whereas, you sometimes see condos having, say, 12 charging points, or shopping malls having a larger number of charging points, right? So HDB drivers, I think, to some extent, feel a little bit left out. But I think that's kind of like a work in progress. And I think it's good that as a nation, we start with a smaller number of charging points and we scale up as the demand grows as well, and as the nation transits ourselves into a fully electrified nation. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Thanks. And I know with electric buses, you have that really fast overhead charging. That is stupendously quick, right? That's only like an hour or two.
Pentagram.
Yeah, that's right. Pantograph. Right? Yeah, really weird word, pantograph. It's nothing to do with Instagram. Yeah. But Ivan, do you know anything about this? Could you tell people about that, if you know? Not so much. John?
Not so much on my part.
Yeah.
I do know one of the key challenges is getting the bus to align properly. And generally, they like to deploy these things at bus stops where the bus is just charging and hanging out there for about 5 to 10 minutes sometimes, right? But it's really the alignment that's one of the key challenges as well.
Okay. But I think one of the key benefits of electric buses is really with your nose, because, if you ever sat at a bus stop and you breathe in all that stuff, it's very bad for you, the PM 2.5s. Does anyone know anything more about that than me? Ed, I think you know, right?
Okay, that's putting me in a little bit of a spot, but
Hey, you want to sell the bus, right?
we're going to small buses, and we're also going to go for the public buses. But for small buses, at least it's nice that we're able to go and ferry normal passengers and commuters around in Singapore, 11 people at a go or maybe more, or 19 seaters. And yes, the benefits are definitely lesser pollution, because it's running on electric. It's a lot more comfortable. You can have idle, you can have the air conditioning on while you're waiting for the passengers to get on and off without worrying about pollution levels. I think you're also going to see that in the future, the larger buses and the public buses, other than your PM 2.5, there's also going to be a system to, how should I put it, clean the air or sanitize the buses in it. I think that's something which a lot of people are doing for the technology to sanitize the buses, as well as additional AI to make sure the people operating the buses don't accidentally fall asleep or get too tired. I think AI is also going to help drive electrification because there's so many things that could go right. Not that I'm saying things will go wrong, but there are so many benefits from adding AI to electrification, and it only benefits all the commuters.
Right. That's cool. I like that. So many things that can go right. I think that sums up the electrification of public transport here. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. So we're going to be steadfastly pessimistic and talk about something that is pretty dangerous. And we're talking about battery recycling and safety. So could I have the next slide, please? Yep. Yeah, that one. So lithium fires burn really fast and really hot, and they need a lot more water than a gasoline fire to put out. So are we prepared for this sort of situation?
Maybe I can start by saying that given that my background is not technical, I don't think there's much we can say to comment about this, especially because it's also related to the vehicle side of things. One thing I can assure is that, safety is SP's highest priority. So whenever it does come to our EV charging installations, right, we, beyond adhering to the TR25 guidelines that are required for charge point operators to stick to, we also have our own internal set of physical as well as cybersecurity standards that are, make it even more stringent when it comes to what we need to follow to deploy our charging stations. So that's really where we are headed, is to make it as safe as possible for the consumers that are using our charging station.
I think Ivan and Xiao, maybe you guys can tell us about the safety procedures that come when you guys install the chargers, or the regulations that you adhere to. Yeah.
I think as long as the CPOs that are installing the chargers are following very closely with the guidelines given by the EMA, LTA, and of course SCDF, with the precautions made, this kind of situations can easily be deterred or unlikely to happen. Yeah.
I think we also have to look at drivers' awareness, and I think again education, right? To be honest, I think generally where we are at as a nation is that a lot of the drivers are overly conservative, i.e. they think that when you have your EV charging at your HDB car park or at your condo car park, it will go up in flames and burn the Bentley that is parked beside that electric vehicles. That's one of the most common, concerns or questions I've always heard from people, right?
Have people actually asked you about that?
Yes.
How many times?
You guys, I do. I got it a few times.
We get
I'm
it a
not
lot
sure
of
about
times,
my
right?
colleagues in the industry. Yeah.
Maybe anecdotally, probably 8 out of 10 conversations I have with new prospective partners.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's do a poll. Ivan?
Yeah, I think this happens a lot, especially in the councils. When we are deciding where to put the charging stations, right? Then there will be, hey, why are you putting it at my block? Can you put it further away? Stuff like that. Because in case it catches fire, it really affect us and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown, right? Because we're all trying to educate consumers more about this new technology. It's actually not new, but they just don't know about it, right? Yeah.
So I think it's about more awareness and education, and I think the global statistics do help us convince the consumers in Singapore as well to be more realistic when it comes to such fires. I think the other thing is I do hear about drivers who are installing perhaps non-approved charging points or non-approved charging devices within their private homes, and I think that's something that as a broadly as an industry, we should highly discourage, because that could really, really pose serious. There's a reason why the Singapore government does not allow that, right? But I think a lot of people are just not aware that it is disallowed. So as a whole, as an industry, I think we should continuously and educate our EV drivers to make it a safer place, right? You see, the issue about having a fire incident is once one incident happens, people think that a million incidents have happened, right? So I think as a nation, if we are able to maintain our good track record, where we have zero fires when it comes to EVs and EV charging, it will help that whole electrification and EV adoption for us to happen faster.
Totally agree with that. Yeah. John, do you have anything to add on that? Yeah.
Not really. I think one of the things is that if an incident happens, it doesn't even need to happen in Singapore, and people will bring it up and try and reference it. So it's really hard to, sometimes it's really hard to convince them that, the regulation safety guidelines that are in place are really meant to protect us from something like that happening.
Ed, in the construction of the commercial vehicles that you have experienced, can you add anything in terms of safety and fire stuff?
I totally agree with everything you have said, and I'd like to just add a little extra. We are our worst enemy because we need to teach ourselves how to utilize the chargers and how and when to charge. Just to highlight a little important thing, we are usually not supposed to charge the vehicle and leave the vehicle on. And that's something which a lot of people with EVs sometimes try to do. I'll just charge the car, I'll leave the air conditioning on, but preferably you're trying to charge and discharge a battery system at the same time, which technically might not be the smartest thing to do. So we are our worst enemy. We need to learn how to use it properly, use it right, and use it well. When we, as well as our drivers and owners, can do that, the world will be a lot safer. Use the items and equipment that we have within its specifications, not try to do something funny.
That's great. Great advice from Ed. Yeah. And if you guys want to know more about EV and safety regulations, and also how to drive, you can look at our second panel, which is coming up after this at about 4:20, 4:30. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. And that is... No, before that, sorry. Yeah. Okay, it's missing, but never mind. The topic is actually alternative energies, including hydrogen and e-fuels. So you guys might have known in the news recently announced the 2050 timeframe for a hydrogen economy in Singapore. So a very contentious topic, hydrogen. You got brown hydrogen, you got green hydrogen. Is this feasible or just wishful thinking on our part? Yeah.
I think hydrogen is not easy to implement generally. I mean, I think we all know about the disadvantages of generating hydrogen. Other than the fact that it could be dangerous because it's highly combustible, right? It is also costly. And the question really is, how do we get the infrastructure up and running? I mean, I may bring everybody back to say about 5-8 years ago, right? Everybody was saying that it's impossible to have an island-wide EV charging network. And I think it's so much easier setting up an EV charging network compared to a hydrogen network, to be very honest, right? So I think really the infrastructure costs as well as the technical feasibility of a hydrogen infrastructure is something that is, I think there is a lot more investigation that still needs to go into it before it can come, it could become something that is massively adopted.
Actually, could you preface that, the part about an EV network being very hard to set up? Yeah.
It's easier to set up compared to a hydrogen economy, but about 5 to 8 years ago, right? If you were to ask people in Singapore, I think most of us would have said that it's impossible. We would have shifted to an EV nation. And I think many people would have said that, I mean, one key barrier to us becoming an EV nation was naturally, a commonly cited reason was that there would be a lack of infrastructure and there would be a lot of challenges in terms of setting up an EV charging infrastructure in Singapore, right? But just what I'm trying to say is relatively a hydrogen infrastructure is even newer and has a lot more barriers to it. So I think there's a lot more investigation that we probably need to look into.
Great.
Okay, let me just add on to that. I think the other thing which is interesting to note is what will be powered by the hydrogen systems and what will be powered by the electrification systems which we have. if we look at demand and supply, which is usually what we use as drivers and what our benefits are, what's going to run on hydrogen, what's going to run on electricity? I think if we look at commercial vehicles, we are going to see a lot of not just the G plates, but also the X and the Y plates, buses. Everything can be run in electrification. Our usual problem for that was always how fast can your chargers recharge the vehicle. Now, if 350 kilowatt, 380 kilowatt chargers are being available, then there is no worry or there's no need to worry about having to look for something else which will take a shorter period of time. The other thing would be hydrogen is dangerous. We all know that. The storage and the procurement and the delivery method would be expensive. In the early days of petrol stations, we had to dig a well underneath the petrol station, make sure it's 6 or 12 inches thick with cement that much. Imagine we'll be doing that or more for hydrogen. But there are benefits because I think in the ports as well as for the planes, we might not be able to use electricity to power those type of vehicles, like a large commercial tanker ship sending containers around the world. I don't think we're going to be able to put so many EV chargers around the world for those. But if it runs on hydrogen, perhaps it could actually have a larger tank, and perhaps that might be the system for hydrogen for the future. But because the technology is not there and ready, supply demand is not quite there. Therefore, we are still more based on an electrified economy more than a hydrogen one, unless the hydrogen one brings more benefits.
Ivan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I think all based on technology. So as technology progresses, these solutions might very well be effective in the future. Yeah.
I think definitely reflecting the sort of never say never attitude that seems to be going around here, right? When you think about it, when you look really far back, right? We've actually been installing EV chargers since 2016, but that was for our own private network, for our own private use, and electrifying our own service and maintenance vehicle fleets. And when we started to go public with it in 2018 and 2019, we started off with 8 locations and only 38 charging points. But now, we have definitely grown to quite an expansive network, almost 640 points, a third of those being fast chargers. If we can answer all the questions like where is it stored, how is it distributed, it's definitely a possibility. But one thing that we also need to overcome, if the public is worried about the safety of electric vehicles, right?
That's a good point. Would they be worried about a large pressurized tank of explosive stuff in the back of your car?
But, without going into the specifics, there are also some misconceptions regarding that. And I think it will be a similar challenge, which is why I say never say never.
I did want to talk about brown and green hydrogen. If any of you know more about that, please go ahead. Yeah. No? Yes?
I mean, generally, I think whether it's brown or green really refers to how the hydrogen was being generated. Where is the electricity source coming from when you electrolyze, the electrons to produce hydrogen, right? So I think it's a very, I don't think it's a topic that people always talk about. It's just like when you look at electric vehicles, people often ask if an electric vehicle is truly green because we are still using fossil fuels to generate electricity at the end of the day. So I think nonetheless, it's always about relativity. I don't think we can ever get to a state where it's super purist, super green, zero carbon emissions type of state. But I think it's about relativity and about, improving that whole emission situation for the world.
I want to just pivot a little bit here. And Singapore is a really sunny place. Do you guys think that they could, so France recently mandated that every new car park should have solar panels built on top of it. Do you think it's a good idea? Could that be adapted to Singapore?
Quite possibly, because land use is definitely a very hot topic here, right? Because we have a very limited amount of land to be used. And what's interesting is we recently spoke to a delegation that came to Singapore from Germany to look into potential collaborations that can be done. And these were tech startups. One of them is actually an off-grid solutions provider for EV charging and hydrogen refueling. And so what they do is, how the electricity is, so what they do is they just ship out these containers to the selected place, right? And then the containers either have swappable batteries or hydrogen tanks that can also be swapped out. But where the batteries are charged and where the hydrogen is produced is actually an off-grid solar and wind farm, right? So that's really an off-grid green solution that I think, if make our land use more efficient would be something that we could deploy here, especially, leading back towards not having enough power for EV chargers in HDB car parks, right? Then that could potentially be a solution that is also sustainable.
Right. And there's also a solution where you can even use the cars as energy storage for the solar energy. What do they call that? Yeah. Sorry.
V2G?
Yeah, that's right. Could you maybe explain that in a few sentences for the viewers?
V2G is where the batteries within the electric vehicles acts like energy storage systems. So the cars charge up, say, throughout the night, and when the grid requires perhaps some relief of stress on the grid, the cars can actually discharge their battery and pump electricity back to the grid. However, I think V2G is obviously one key technology areas that everybody is looking at. But we all know that the battery is the most expensive component within the electric vehicles. So the question is, as an electric vehicle driver, what will actually attract you enough? What are some of the incentives and frameworks that need to be around, such that you would be willing to actually, sacrifice one battery cycle on your battery just to help relieve the stress on the grid? And therefore, I think because of the economics, it hasn't really been taking off, and drivers are just not as incentivized as they should be, lah. Yeah.
Okay, great explanation. Thanks, Xiao. I'm going to go on to the next part of this topic, e-fuels and biofuels. Do you guys think those are viable or sustainable choices for us moving forward? Because, ICE engines are not going to go away for at least, 10, 20 years. Yeah, what do you think?
I think if there's an alternative fuel that we could use to power the ICE vehicles at the moment, that it's cleaner and greener, it can be a stopgap for the meantime. But my personal opinion is electrification is here or is almost 100% here. It's just a matter of a short period of time to clean it up, to change it. I also remember something like reading something in Singapore about if all the vehicles, commercial as well as passenger vehicles, are converted to pure electric, I think that hits a target of 14% of our government's clean air program, which technically will be fast and quick and easy, and it also benefits all of us in a very short span of time. So why additionally burn something when we can have just one source of combustion, which is the power generators, and then us just go on cleaner energy?
Good point, Ed. Good. Ivan, anything to add?
I think as mentioned, e-fuels are likely more expensive, a lot more expensive than even gasoline or just electricity. Right now, the use of it to replace or to rely less on fossil fuel, I think that's a good use. Just that maybe for larger commercial airplanes or commercial fleets of ships, that battery solutions are still insufficient for. Yeah, I think that might be the right solution. We might see the adoption on the few areas first.
Great. John? Yeah.
This is not really my wheelhouse, but one thing I can say is odd that we were talking just about land use when it comes to solar panels, right? When you think about biofuels, there's also a land use argument there because you need to use the land to grow the biomass or whatever it is that you use to create those fuels. So there is a potential argument around that area as well. But you are correct in saying that, yes, when it comes to energy density of a fuel, then when it comes to airplanes and larger tankers and things like that, that may end up being a requirement. But also to add on to what Edward's saying, about the single point of combustion for generation of our energy when it comes to our passenger and commercial vehicles. It's a lot easier to clean up the emissions from one point than it is distributed across several 100,000 vehicles, right? So that's it.
Good point, John, about the cost, actually. Yeah. Okay, we're going for the home run right now. Our last topic. Can I get the next slide, please? So car light and electrification. So the photo shows actually Dr. Gianni Puticeri at a Charge Plus event I attended about 2 weeks ago. And this was in Pongo, the most utilized HCB EV charger in the north. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. But it got me thinking as well about the fact of car light doesn't mean no cars, right? It doesn't mean they don't use a COE. So factoring in COE prices and other issues, how do we balance car light on one hand and electrifying vehicles on the other? Ed, you're dying to say something, I know.
If I'm coming from the part of a salesperson, I would like everyone to have a car, a vehicle, or something. But
Okay,
unfortunately,
give us both POVs.
unfortunately, I can't do that. Okay. I would think that if the government really wants everyone to go car light, number one, our car prices are already highest in the world. I think yesterday's shocking announcement of the COE prices definitely put a shock to everyone, including, surprisingly, even on the motorcycle side of it, so across all forms of transportation. Because of that, there is a chance that not everyone can afford to own a car, or a form of what I consider private cell transportation, that people might have to move into group cells or mass cells, just changing the concept instead of calling it a car or a motorcycle, but a way of moving people around. Cost of moving, cost of ownership, electrification does work, but electrification and the car light system don't quite align. It needs to be a little bit segregated a little bit for what the purposes are. We can use electrification to make a better quality of life. We can make electrification to provide a more reliable source of public transportation and a easier system of transport. But we can never get away from the need of cars or motorbikes for deliveries, for food, for transportation. We need to balance the needs and wants of the people and going supposedly car light. How to balance a car light? That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you.
If I want to be a little bit tangent off, I would say give us more public buses which are electrified with all the new AI and air conditioning. Give us better MRT systems where we can move masses around. Give us the ability to have maybe not private, well, it's a toss-up between this, because I might get shot from one group or another, private hire or taxis having ability to bring more cost-effective transportation for us. Maybe if it doesn't go in cars, maybe small buses or other alternate systems, smaller groups. We need to move people around. We want to reduce our cost. The new generation theoretically doesn't really want to buy cars so much nowadays because they find that cars are expensive. But cars are still a good source of revenue for the government. And we are, don't shoot me for this, a slightly selfish culture where we do like our cars. So we need to find a balance for all that, and that will be the elephant in the room because nobody really wants to address it. We know we need to do it, but we need to see how we can do it. Our costs have gone up because of the COEs, and that is deterring some people from buying. But we need to think further on how we can achieve that particular goal.
I agree with you, totally. Our charge point guys, anything to add? Yeah.
I mean, what's really interesting about this, in a sense, this discussion topic, right, is that car light and the encouraging electrification, these two things are actually aimed at increasing sustainability in our country, right? And SP can definitely help with the latter because of our electric vehicle charging network. We can support the electrification of vehicles in this country. But one of the ways that we can strive and move towards a car-light society is actually by supporting shared mobility. And so one of the key examples that SP is supporting this, right, is in Tengah Newtown. So we did sign a MOU to collaborate with Borneo Motors to support their car sharing services that they will be offering at Tengah Newtown, right? And we also hope that from this initiative, we can also collect some very important data insights concerning user needs and habits and behaviors, right? So that we can shape the service into something that is more ideal for more people as we go into the future.
So I think as a nation, what we should always do is trying to reduce the number of vehicles that we have first, but whatever vehicles that we still need, to run whatever, say, deliveries or, for personal usage, etc., should then be a large part electric, because then that is how we ensure that our nation is sustainable as a whole and reduce our emissions to the lowest, at least emissions contribution from the transport sector, right? So generally, that's what we should do. And I think in terms of the car light bit, putting myself in the shoes of, Singaporeans, right? I think the standard of living in Singapore generally has gone up. Edward is right that I think a lot of the youngsters nowadays don't really care about buying a car because it's just simply too expensive and can spend that money on, holidays and things like that. But there are certain day-to-day events that would happen. So, for example, if I put my own personal experiences, right, just sharing with everybody, I didn't get a car until I had a child. And I realized that the car was very important because I really didn't want to carry my child, a crying baby, onto the trains and, start disturbing the rest of the passengers, right? So I think it's really then that day-to-day a challenge that you face on a personal basis that will lead you to feel the strong need of having a vehicle. Which is why I then think that, having a lot of car sharing services nowadays is actually a good thing to have. So services like TrapCar, services like GetGo, BlueSG, etc. I think we're all familiar with such services. And these shared mobility services really value add, and solve some of these personal problems that I think a lot of Singaporeans on the street face such a real problem, I would say, right? So you get that privacy while at the same time you get to drive a car without having to own a car, right? And you see a lot of these car sharing services actually electrifying their fleet as well. So it's not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can come together. And I think with the growth of EV charging infrastructure in HDB locations, that have been super helpful because a lot of these car sharing services are actually located in the HDBs, right? So say 603, there is a GetGo a lot just right beside the charging point, and the GetGo customer can just charge their EV there, right? So it's not mutually exclusive, and in fact, I think it's additive, and it helps us move towards a cleaner nation at the end of the day. Yeah.
Great. A great point about the GetGo part as well. Ivan, anything to add about this?
Okay, so like they mentioned, I think car sharing is widely accepted right now. And you know that these vehicles that are using for car sharing is also for grabs on the COE. So when it gets popular, the car sharing firms are grabbing the available COE right now, which also increase the price of COE. Then again, the entire passenger vehicles will have difficulties on purchasing a car right now because of the increasing of the price. So I think maybe something can be done to promote car sharing, and of course, on people buying the car. So yeah, whole in whole.
Great, thanks, Ivan. Let me check the time. We're a little bit early. But yeah, we got one more subtopic, and that is everyone's favorite topic, charge hogging. So what can you guys do about it? I mean, I read all the Facebook posts, right? And it's like, yeah, the guy leave the car there for very long, that kind of thing. So yeah, what can be done? Yeah. I mean, so far, Tesla is the one that has implemented a 50 cent per minute, charge for this sort of thing. So, do you think that works? I think it works. Yeah.
I think. I think charge hogging is a lot on the user, whether or not he knows that the car is fully charged, or is it time to move out of the lot for somebody else to use it. So notification and education of the individual user is very important. Then as much as we want to promote transition of electric vehicle, we don't want to keep penaltying these users, but to encourage them by using like credit points and give them for behaving a good driving etiquette, to move out on time or to go to their reservation on time, yeah, stuff like that to help rotate this charge hogging issue.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a day one question for us. How do we manage this? How do we manage this problem, right? And I think, right now when you finish your charging on an SPC station, the app does send you a notification to tell you that your charging session has completed, and it encourages you to move your vehicle in 15 minutes. And I think I'm confident to say that this works most of the time, but we are really talking at this point about outliers, about really that 1% of situations, right, where someone overstays. And I mean, yes, hogging fees might work because that seems like what is being implemented now by a lot of charge point operators. But we also might want to think about whether or not it would be better to incentivize people to have good behavior, right? So is there some type of points or some type of rewards that they can accumulate by being a consistently courteous EV charger, an EV user, right? So I think that's definitely a nicer way to go. And I think it would also help bridge the gap between those that drive EVs and those that don't drive EVs, right? And you get into that subtopic about also what happens if a non-EV ends up parking in an EV lot. So once again, I take reference from some of our conversations we've had with European countries. Misuse of an EV lot over there is treated like you are a non-handicapped person who parked in a handicapped spot. But one really interesting compromise that we have seen, right, is for those locations with AC charging, overnight charging, right? They said that if you come into the car park past, let's say, 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. at night, and the EV lot is actually empty, they won't penalize you if you drive a combustion vehicle and you park your vehicle there. And I think that's actually a very, very nice way to bridge the gap, in the interim, before we start moving towards a more fully electrified future.
Great. I like that idea. I mean, being very Singaporean, I thought of the stick. I didn't think of the carrot at all. Yeah, Xiao Han.
No, I think they covered it comprehensively. We have the carrot, we have the stick, and we have the constant reminders, right? So that pretty much sums up what the CPOs want to do every day. And but to be fair to the EV driver community in Singapore, I think a lot of them are becoming a lot more conscious. The Facebook posts that you're reading, I think they help a lot. So you don't see, once your car plate number appears twice, I think you don't see them the third time, right? So I think some of these, that whole community helps as well in terms of educating and encouraging people to be more considerate. Yeah, so I think, that's just part and parcel of the entire journey as we move towards electrification.
Great, right. So that is all for our first panel. I'd like to thank my panelists for their time. Really, really grateful. And I just want to hijack you guys for a minute and say, on behalf of the EV Weekend Organizing Committee, Lincoln, and our fabulous marketing manager, Samantha, we did the job of 10 people to make this a possibility. So a round of applause. And to go back in time, CarBuyer has been around for more than a decade and a half. And with the last in-print car magazine in Singapore, it was actually founded by a gentleman here, Mr. Liao Julen. And moving on, he's going to take an advisory role in CarBuyer. I like to call him the Minister Dementor, Editor Emeritus. But on behalf of the content team, Julen, thanks for your work over the years. It was a pleasure working with you. Stand up, man. Come on. Yeah. You may not know him, but yeah. Try not to talk to him. It's better if you don't. Okay, that's all for panel one. Luke, we're going to have a break, aren't we?
Yes, thank you, panelists and Darren. I would now like to invite the panelists for a quick photo opportunity with Darren. You can just, right in front. Thank you. Thank you, panelists and Darren. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be taking a 5-minute break before commencing with our next panel. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be moving on to our second panel titled EV Adopted, What Now? This panel will focus on topics and concerns of EV owners and consumers over the short term, the next 2 or 3 years. Our panelists for this session will consist of Alvin Seat, President of Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore, Christopher Quek, a current EV owner, Pang Jing Long, Head of General Insurance of Singlife with Aviva, and last but not least, Peter Huang, an owner of a Tesla Model 3. Moderating this panel will be our very own Kimberly Ng of CarBuyer Singapore. Kim, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you are filling your tummies. As Luke mentioned, this panel will focus on the consumer and what it's like to own an EV. So basically, obviously, to kick things off, I'd like to pose this question to the owners of EVs. What have been the highs and lows of EV ownership thus far?
So I drive a Model 3 Standard, so it's got a smaller battery than the Performance, and the range is a little bit less. This is my second EV. So my first EV had even smaller battery, and that only had realistically 200 plus kilometers, and that was in 2018. So imagine the charging system back then, and I didn't have home charging, so I was really trying to push the boundaries of what you could do as an EV owner. So there was some anxiety to begin with. So that's the only real headache. Of course, the other headache is trying to deal with the insane number of questions that people will ask you when they realize, oh, you drive electric car. So that's the other, you have to keep on explaining. So, it's actually cleaner. Why is it cleaner? We have a fossil fuel grid. Oh, it's cleaner because it's more efficient, blah, blah, blah. Why? So there's a lot of unofficial ambassadorship that comes along with this lifestyle. So that's the slightly more headache part. The pro side of it is, as a person who travels quite a lot pre-pandemic, I'm a musician, so I did quite a lot of international touring. I was quite conscious of my own personal carbon footprint. So this is something that I want to do to try to balance it out. And as a fairly new parent, I have 3 kids under 3, so I wanted to really do something for the next generation. So that's something that I feel a little better about, I guess.
Well, thanks a lot. I've only adopted driving an electric car last year. I got an iX3 and I love it. The fact that my timing was pretty convenient. 3 years ago, I renovated my house. I also solar powered my house. When I did that, I had a plan to go into EVs. And last year was a push time where I said, okay, let's get an EV car because of the incentives from the government. And I went around hunting for EV cars. Strangely, the only brand I didn't go and try was a Tesla. But I went around testing the other cars, and I just fell in love with the iX3. The beauty about the whole arrangement for me was, previously when I drive a petrol car, each week I would fill up about $150 to $160. Converted to this present time, if I were to use a petrol car still, I'll be pumping in $200 a week, which means $800 savings a month. That was the best deal, because the fact that I charge my car using solar power, because I also work from home quite a lot, it's not an issue, because charging the cars, I do it maybe twice a week. Yeah. In terms of the only setback I would say for me is because the electric cars are heavier. Within 1 year, I've already changed my tires because I clocked about 20,000 kilometers. That would be my only main gripe about the EV car. Right?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Seat, Mr. Pan. Do you have anything else to add on to that?
No, I think personally, I'm not a EV owner. Actually, I wanted to be. And then unfortunately, I think the COE price has been really, really high. So I have a 3-year-old, And then I think one of the things is lifestyle do change it. So hopefully that will, eventually that will come down a bit, or we're looking for different ways of maybe car sharing, different methodologies to make it up for it.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned about the EV batteries being very heavy, and that tends to add a lot of kinetic energy to that. So do you feel that maybe there should be EV-specific driver training, and how would insurance, play into that as well?
Yeah, I think the EV vehicle in general, the way how it's built is very different. So what that means is from both the driver perspective, how it's being operated, as well, most importantly, from the repairing perspective, how it's being repaired. In Singapore, there are about hundreds of workshops, being able to repair traditional vehicles, but actually not a lot of them can, what we call certify to repair EV vehicles. Because what happens is it requires a different sort of the setup, and also the voltage in terms of the detecting the vehicle damages. And also, the most importantly, the workers, they need to be certified to understand how to repair, treating the vehicles. So all of that actually come into make things very different, how we insuring the vehicles, because also what that means is that the repair cost for the EV vehicles also be very different than the traditional vehicles. So that eventually going to factor in into the insurance premium. So that's from the insurance perspective. That's one thing is quite different.
Right. And for, say, Mr. Quek, and have you had any troubles with the batteries so far with your EVs?
Both my current car and my previous car, I've never had any issues. So my first EV, I clocked 80-something thousand kilometers in 3 years, and I had no issues whatsoever. And actually, as far as tires were concerned, I only changed it once in that 80,000 plus kilometers. So I guess it also depends on the type of model. Perhaps iX3 is a bit heavy. I don't know. But for me, the vehicle I had, maybe because it had a smaller battery, it had less weight, I don't know. So that probably factored into it. I do try to drive efficiently as much as I can as well. So I'm not really a right lane kind of guy. So maybe that helps.
Right. And Mr. Seed, I mean, as president of the Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore, what has been like the sentiment on the ground for all the EV enthusiasts and such?
Yeah, I think in general, people have education is a good part we have to begin with. Yes, in EVs, by the way they're built, are heavier. So there are certain wear and tear items like tires that would probably take on more of the wear. But then there are also things that you save. You don't have an exhaust system you have to worry about. The cooling system is easier because you don't have to deal with the amount of heat from the internal combustion engine. And part of the braking of the vehicle comes from regenerative braking using the motors. So you have less wear and tear on the tires. On the brakes as well. So there's a bit of plus on one side and then a bit of a minus on the other side. In general, maintenance costs are about maybe half the price of a regular combustion engine vehicle. So in terms of that, the vehicle weight, I mean, you can't cheat physics. It still takes a toll on the car in terms of the tires. But I think everything else is better. And as the other part of your question regarding specific training, EVs drive a little bit differently in the sense that most of them have regenerative braking, and some of them brake to a complete stop. Yeah, so I think that part requires maybe, it depends from person to person, of course. Some people can get used to it pretty quickly, and some people may take a bit longer time. But the general consensus is after you get so used to driving with regenerative braking, some people forget to actually, when they switch over back to to a petrol car, they actually forgot to press the brakes, right, to slow down. Yeah, until they realize, it's not slowing down, and I have to switch over to the brakes yourself. So it takes a bit of getting used to. But I think as humans, one of our greatest strength is being able to adapt. Yeah, so it's just being able to open your mind and try it and see how it works for yourself, and then get used to the future of mobility, right?
Well said. Thank you. And actually, on that again topic of batteries, there does tend to be a higher insurance premium for EVs. Yes. So and certain insurers also don't provide covers for like battery failures or defects. And so I was just curious from you guys' experience, how would that work? Where is the handover from manufacturer to insurer, if there is any?
Yeah, I think the traditional motor insurance, if we may, in the Singapore market, generally what we're covering is everything that's causing by accidents. So if there's an accident, then any parts of the vehicle being damaged, so of course insurance is going to be covering it. I think what you're mentioning about battery is what we call the defects or wear and tear. So normally that's under the what do you call the original manufacturer warranty. So the brand new vehicle comes in. I was just checking with with him the warranty. He said 5 years. So basically anything within the 5 years, your battery wear and tear, everything will be free to be replaced. Of course, sometimes the vehicle, it doesn't come that long warranty, like 3 years sometimes. So there is an insurance product. What we're trying to do is trying to mirror the manufacturer warranty. So we call it extended warranty. So that basically is providing the same kind of service coverage, just extended from 3 years up to 5 years or 7 years. That is another different type of insurance product. It's not a traditional motor insurance product, per se, yeah.
All right. And for Mr. Quek and Mr. Huang, what have your own experiences been like with that?
Generally, whether it's my current car or my previous car, I have not had any maintenance concerns, with the exception of changing tire once every 40,000 kilometers or topping up the wiper fluid, replacing the wiper blades. Really, that's it. And even though my first car had a really small battery, therefore a higher cycle frequency, even after 80,000 kilometers, I didn't really notice any degradation or loss of range, to be honest. So to me, it has been a fairly pleasant surprise compared to the previous ICE vehicles that I've owned, where after, say, the second year, you do notice that the engine is less efficient, just a little bit. Even if it's second or third year, you can already kind of tell. But with my EV, I really couldn't notice anything. So I'm not too concerned because I'm fairly confident that the battery technology in 2022 is fairly mature or maturing very, very quickly. Yeah.
Actually, for me, the fact that one of the simple pleasures I have is getting into the car. Previously, in the previous petrol car I had, the BMW would tell me my next service is due in 3 to 4 months' time. Now I get into my car, the first time I saw it, it's 2 years away. So that's a great relief for me. I love the fact that I don't have to really send a car to a workshop that often.
And this is actually just a curiosity. How often, or have you ever driven your EV down to 0? Really, just max it out.
I've driven it down to 10 plus 20 kilometers remaining. That's the lowest I've gone. Yeah, that was a little bit unnecessarily exciting.
How so?
This is 2018. So it got a little bit, oh my goodness, where is there was no like combined map that you have on PlugShare, So you are pretty much basing off of memory and where the nearest charge points are. So luckily at the time, my first car, there was this vehicle-to-vehicle charge service. So they'll come and then they'll DC charge you at 20-something kilowatts. And then after like 25 minutes, you get like 40-something kilometers worth, and then you drive off to the nearest charge point. So that was a very reassuring service, which I only activated once, ever, which is that one time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on my previous car, I drove down to single digit. Yeah.
So brave.
I think possibly it was also because, I don't know, my profession, I quite get down to minimum levels of energy. But anyway, that's a different story. Yeah, but I drove down to single digit. I managed to get to the I think it was a Shell station I managed to get to and charge it up there. Yeah, but I think generally people don't push too far just because it's actually not very good for your battery to drive down to too low a charge. The car can take it. It's just that you know if possible you try not to squeeze every last drop out of it, and then you get into that situation where you're degrading the battery, accelerated degradation more than necessary, right? So for me, I think in terms of battery degradation and warranty, the previous question, it comes down to how each manufacturer is comfortable with their own technology. I think Paul and myself, we did some videos about on reviews of certain cars before. I think the warranty we used to see in the past of the older, maybe first generation models, some were as low as 3 years. Some, I mean, we're talking about battery warranty, as low as 3 years. Some, majority of them were about 5 years, and then some of them were more confident at 8 years. Now we are starting to see more of them becoming almost 8 years is almost a de facto already, and then some are pushing to 10 years already. So if the manufacturer is confident of their battery technology and how much degradation they can expect, to sustain over the period of time, they can give a better warranty period to cover the battery. Of course, that's just for battery degradation, unusual battery degradation. If it was due to an accident, then of course that's where the line goes over to the insurer to cover that. Yeah.
Thank you. Now that then brings me to my next question. With insurance, especially for batteries, going up and up, you're covered for much longer. The benefits are there, it's very clear, but the country still seems to be pretty far away from widespread adoption. Personally, from all four of you, what do you think we can do to ensure that EVs are more widespread in the country among the everyday driver, car buyer?
Maybe I can. So because I was considering buying it personally last year. I think one of the reasons I didn't move forward is really the price. The COE, everything included. Where I'm staying, I think the charging point is there, so the infrastructure is there, and so I'm staying in a condo, so that is, to me, is not an issue. Personally, I think the EV owner understands the saving once you switch it. It's definitely there. I think to me, as a potential owner, I think the price that was the reason I didn't move forward.
Actually, the trigger why I bought last year was I could buy an iX3 EV for the same price as a petrol car, which was very unusual because with all the rebates, I ended up paying for the same price of a petrol car. I could get an electric car. Of course, the fact that when my wife sat in the car and drove, and said, "You try the car." And then when I drove the car, I said, "Wow." Because 3 years before that, I had driven a test drive also with the idea of buying an electric car. I didn't like it because the fact that I felt the car was like a golf cart. The response because of the regenerative braking. I hated that. So that's why I said, never mind, I'll push it off. But when I actually got to drive the car last year, the technology has evolved so much. And this is why I'm also excited with the cars that are coming in. Because what happened is the period when I was looking at cars, I was constantly looking at YouTube reviews and all that.
On
Almost
CarBuyer?
every week, I see a new, also CarBuyer. And what happens, I see new, I had to give it a plug, right? I see a new technology coming in, especially from Chinese. And I says, wow, okay, and I'm excited. I definitely will consider, I'm already pressured by the wife to buy a second car for the children. But I'm already considering the fact that I will most probably upgrade or change.
You could get an iX3 at the same price. You must have a very good sales agent. Who's your sales agent at VML? So I think personally, to make that transition, right, or to increase or how to increase this adoption of electric vehicles, people respond to different things. Some people it's about dollars and cents. Some people, it's about, I mean, personally, for me, it's not about dollars and cents just because I don't drive enough to make it worthwhile. My yearly driving is maybe about 10,000 kilometers around there. So I don't drive enough to make it worth the financial sense. For me, it's more about trying to do my bit for the environment. And then, to some people, it could be, yeah, I mean, if you're giving me a good deal, sure, why not? And looking for, yeah, if the starting price is the same, then, your cost of fuel is the same.
That's right.
And some people, it could be safety, right? Because, EVs, Tesla, for example, is one of the safest vehicles around. So to some people, it could be the technology, like new gadgets, right? New technology, new vehicle driver assist systems, and so on and so forth. So what appeals to one person may not appeal to another person. So it's just finding the right reasons to make that switch. And part of that comes from education. Some of that comes from just being willing to open your mind to go and have a look at electric cars. Like maybe the first time you went to see one and you test drive one, you didn't like it. Possibly back then the regenerative braking was not adjustable, right? It was, you let go and that what you got was what you got. You couldn't change that. Yeah, exactly. So, but going forward, new technologies come up, and now they have adjustable regenerative braking, and now you feel, hey, this is right. So part of it is doing your homework, going out there, looking at cars, looking at and opening your mind to say, well, it's not, let's not write it off. It's something that can be done, and it's not that difficult. A number of people also, I think, a rough poll, about 80% of people actually who drive electric cars actually don't have personal charging as well. So to some people, having a private charging point or having a convenient place to charge a car is key. And if they don't have that, I'm not going to buy, right? So, but you have to open up your mind and say, well, what are the other alternatives? And on as far as the EVAS is concerned, and working with the EVCOs, we can see how we can solve some of these pain points. Like if we can help condo management and councils understand what is required to get their ECCG, their common charger grants, and have chargers installed in their condos, and things like that. So from our perspective, is trying to solve pain points, and then that will help. Make it easier for people to make that transition.
Thank you. And Mr. Huang, anything to add?
No, that's very comprehensive already. My own personal experience has been so far quite pain-free. I've had the experience of living without a home charger, and then there was a period of time that I rented landed, and then I did install a home charger. So I've lived on both sides of the fence. And yes, if you have a home charger, the home charging rate is cheaper, even if you don't have solar, right? I was renting, so I couldn't install solar. So from the grid, cheaper. But honestly, even if you're charging at the DCFCs outside, even at the highest available rates outside right now, which is like 55 cents per kilowatt hour, it's still significantly cheaper than any type of ICE car, right? And coming back to the topic about having a vehicle, an option of an EV vehicle that at a certain price point with the current grants, right? So when I got my Model 3, for similar size and power sedans, it was at a very competitive price point. And when you factor in the fuel savings, it's no-brainer, right? And actually, unfortunately, because I have 3 children under 3, I can't really hold on to my Model 3. I have to sell it soon. We can talk about that with CarBuyer later on. He's very happy. And then I'm
your car, get a free ice cream.
Yeah. So I've actually ordered my next EV, which is a 7-seater. And I realized because EVs can do something that ICE vehicles cannot do, which is have much better pickup, right? Therefore, a much bigger Class 3 vehicle, like the size of a Velfire or Alphard, if it was an ICE car, it would have to be Cat B, because the petrol engine has to be bigger. But mine's going to be Cat A. So that's a huge difference in price in that segment right there. So I would say that one way of enticing more bigger families to switch to EVs, it would be for the market to eventually have more choices of 7-seaters. That's, I feel, a missing segment currently.
All right. Thank you for that. And actually, on that topic of charging, can I just ask, okay, each of you, how many apps for EV charging do you have in your phone?
But these, oh, you have home charging. So I use about 7.
Yeah, feel free to take out your phones and check.
Wait,
How
wait,
many
wait,
apps?
wait. I need to look at my folder. So I can just name it, right? It's okay. So I have CDG, Shell Recharge, Charge Plus, SP. I believe these have representatives of, and Blue Charge.
5.
Yeah, Blue Charge. Once in a blue moon, I will use the Pack EV Link, which is a very small company. So that's about it. So the primary ones I use are Shell Recharge, CDG, Charge Plus, SP.
Right.
And once in a blue moon, Blue Charge.
Yeah.
Just because it's really slow. But it is actually the cheapest if you're just there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I don't mind. It's an ad hoc thing.
Yeah.
So that's for me lah. You guys don't really use public, right?
Actually, I have something like 4 Singapore apps and 3 Malaysian apps, just in case I drive into Malaysia. But I've yet to use any of the outside chargers yet. There is a fixation for people about charging the cars. Seriously, if you can imagine, if I were to use a petrol car for a week, $200, my mileage is also fairly high. I only charge on my home charger, twice a week. So you really don't need to be so fixated about having to visit a charger every day or every other day. Yeah.
Right. I guess my charging habits are quite different. I'm like the guy who's carrying his laptop around. If I happen to be sitting down at a Starbucks and there's a plug right there, even if I'm at 60, I'm going to plug it in. So I don't wait lah. Yeah. It's a different mindset.
Yes.
Altogether. And I do have some opinions about whether having an app for everything is
that's my next question. You know, should there be one app to rule them all, or?
Yeah, well, can I say yes? Yes. Preferably, I've heard of certain parts of the world where it's just every station has a PayWave.
Yeah.
You just PayWave, Apple Pay this, like a supermarket purchase. That would be preferable, please.
Please, if anyone's listening, please. One app.
Are the guys still here? Or went washroom conveniently?
And you mentioned you also have the Malaysian apps. Have any of you, tried driving your EV up to Malaysia and further?
Okay, I do. I have some Singapore apps, not a lot. I think part of it is because I can home charge, but I still do. I think I use SP rarely, once in a while. But I think for me, at least, I have more Malaysian charging apps than I have Singapore apps. So, and I do use them. I've driven up to Penang twice this year alone. Yeah. So, and the thing is, I think it's a problem that I won't say a problem, but it's something that is universal to some extent. Malaysia also has a lot of different charging companies coming into the market, and my 2 trips were about 3 months apart, but in the span of 3 months, I've already seen more and more chargers coming up, and some different brands coming up. Some of them are even just putting their chargers on trial and giving free electricity. So but the network is growing. I think at this stage, most of the operators are just trying to cover as many locations as possible. They're not. I think the focus is not really to say, okay, let's really work on having a unified app to do everything, because I think some Singaporeans, I don't want to generalize, but maybe you can ask around yourselves as well. If you have to pay for a roaming fee on top of the charging operator's fee, say a charging operator is charging 50 cents, and then to go through the app, you have to pay, say, 5 cents more, because the app has to have some financial reason to do it, right? And so they are putting in the work to aggregate all this, to get all the information, which chargers are available. You can go there and you can plug it in and you can go through their payment gateway to make that payment through their unified app. Somebody's got to make some money somewhere. And so if you are the end user and you say, well, if I have this branded chargers app and I can pay 50 cents per kilowatt, would I want a unified app that I have to pay 55 cents per kilowatt? Right, so it's kind of most people might say, well, if then I'll just have the more common ones that I always use, and I'll just have one app or two apps for those, and then I'll have that unified app, but then I may not want to use unless I'm really going to somewhere that has some other off-brand charger that is not part of the ones that I usually have. Yeah, so sometimes the market, I think, is kind of market driven. If the market is not willing to pay that kind of premium or for that roaming charges using a unified app, then the charging operators also not so incentivized to go down that path. I mean, they are exploring, I'm sure. I think they are in early talks of there are some operators looking at unifying, creating a unified app for that. Yeah, so we'll just see how this market develops in the next year or so.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pan, do you have anything to add as well?
Well, I think competition is always good. If I come in from the business perspective, it always drives better service, better value, eventually for the consumers. Clearly, you do want to regulate it because it is very sensitive. It is affecting people's livelihood. And then I think some of the topics previous panel was talking about, how do you making sure people are behaving responsibly when they're charging. I think all of the stuff will come into picture. But overall, in general, I think competition normally will bring a better results in the long run. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And with that, we have come to the end of our panel. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hand it over to my colleague Luke.
Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists and Kimberly. May I now invite you guys for a photo opportunity? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the EV Weekend plenary session. Thank you for your undivided attention throughout. Once again, on behalf of the CarBuyer team, our sincere appreciation for making the time to attend. Do stick around and check out the EVs on display. That being said, take care and we'll see you guys around. Thank you.